Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. All right, again, as we said before, I've started to upload the videos. They should be up by this afternoon. To repeat again, the test will be online. It will be this weekend. So it will start, as I said, 12:01 tomorrow morning. You have it open all the way until Sunday evening at 11:59, and you have 75 minutes to complete the test. The word of warning is that if you're shoving up against the edge of that, it will shut it off at 11:59. So even if you got 5 or 10 minutes left on the test itself, it's gonna clothesline it. All right, so just word of warning there. So let's finish up talking about franchising structures and strategies. And we had left off talking about contracts and the importance of contracts. And also their uses, along with everything else, as a benefit to the entire system. So we talked about business formatting, the payment systems, leasing. Now we're talking about the termination. So along with the contracts listed are reasons for termination and ultimately why you would want to do that. The truth is that in any good contract structure, what you're looking for is you're looking for positive reasons for staying in the game. And so usually what you will find in the contracts themselves are what would be benefits for staying connected with one group versus another. You would not want the franchisee to go out for any deliberate reasons. The franchisor wants them to continue and to grow with success. But if the time comes along and they feel that they are failing to lead up to their obligations, then termination will happen. All right. It's expensive, it's difficult, but it's happening. And it's for the very same reasons as we always talk about. Place is the most expensive and most difficult of the 4 Ps. If the franchisee may have an out. So the franchisee, if they find that they're unable to fulfill their obligations and they have to get out, one of the parachutes that they have is the ability to find a replacement, someone who will be able to take over them, a corporation that's experienced, and they can, in essence, perform in that same area where the franchisee was. However, most good contracts have what's known as right of first refusal. The right of first refusal means that they can either A, match what the offer the franchisee receives. In other words, if they're taking that and selling it to another franchisee, they can match that offer and make it a company store. Or what they can also do is basically say that corporation is inherently not competent enough to be one of our franchisees. Now, the other reason for right of refusal is sometimes, well, the magic is in multi-unit franchising is that you can actually own more than one franchise, and ironically, you could own, a competitor could own your the rights to you. So that's another reason why you have right of first refusal. Right of first refusal means A, if I can match it, I will. And so I'll take that franchise over. B, I have the right to refuse a corporation which I consider to be insufficient to be able to fulfill their obligations as a franchisee. So what are the three most important things about contracts? Well, the first is that contracts need to be consistent. The contract for a multi-unit franchise in which a corporate or franchisee owns more than one franchise has to be the exact same one as an emerging franchisee who's just coming in. This is a critical point because all franchisees must be treated equitably. Everybody's got the same contract. Now, within the contracts themselves, the benefits and rewards that are spelled out for growing are the same as the biggest franchisees and the smallest, but it's the same. Usually they're offered on a take it or leave it basis. They have been working on these contracts for years. And so just about every bell and whistle and fine tuning has been performed, and this contract is the best that it can ever be. As I said, they don't vary over time. They remain consistent. And one of the reasons for consistency, if you're looking at the big reason, if you're looking at a test question of why they remain consistent, that is to treat all franchisees equally and fairly. The next is enforcement. You hope not to enforce contracts, but what you hope to do is push the benefits of compliance. If there is non-compliance by a franchisee, let's just say they miss a payment or any other particular reason, there are many reasons why the franchisor will not enforce. Many times, just simply to grow the relationship and keep going, you will not enforce it because you want to secure and safeguard the relationship more than you want to be able to punish one of your franchisees for non-compliance. The last is what is known as self-enforcing agreements. And what this means is that within the contract, there are incentives that basically state that cheating is not in the best interest of the franchisee. And so this is what a self-enforcing agreement means, is that the wording is balanced or based on ensuring that cheating is not in their best interest. This can be such examples as if you're looking or you're willing to try to go buy the goods from another location, what the franchisor does is that they sell their particular goods at such a substantial discount that there's no reason to go to look for other suppliers. Now, there's also in contracts the right is that they do not have the ingredients necessary to perform that day. They can, on the short run, go buy those goods from someone else. That's not a non-compliance or what it does recognize, though, if you're doing that in the long run, it doesn't make sense. We're going to talk about power in chapter 10. Power is the ability for one body to be able to influence the actions of another. And the difficulty with power is that it needs to be balanced in order for both sides to feel secure. In the franchise or franchisee's arrangement, that's usually not possible because corporate, of course, holds most of the cards themselves. And so the self-enforcement agreements, their real purpose is to balance the power between them all. And the difficulty comes sometimes is that creates its own imbalances. And so these are the three main pieces of contracts and franchises, that they are consistent, that they have some level of enforcement, although you don't want to enforce them because you want to be able to grow the relationship, and that there are self-informing agreements which basically hope to ensure that cheating is not in the best interest of the franchisees. I should say also the franchisors as well. So one of the examples of how these contracts can actually go in both ways is Subway. So Subway had grown dramatically. It was the #1 franchise in terms of growth for like 8 years in a row, having mostly to do with the lower price of their franchises. The difficulty came around in 2021, of course, when COVID hit and the issues that corporate Subway was having with shipping all of their goods. Now, if you look at their contracts, one of the things that they expect, the franchisees, is to get fresh goods every day. Well, in a time of emergency, what corporate Subway did was they said, well, we can't do it every day. The best we can do it is once every 3 days. I don't know anyone in here who wants to eat 3-day-old lettuce. And that was one of the difficulties that Subway had, and it's why they started the slide. This is where the contracts actually turned on the side of the franchisees, and we're able to say a contract is a contract. They still have kind of mixed, they're back to daily deliveries, but they've really hurt themselves with that whole arrangement. I lived in a small town in Mississippi known as Columbia. It was a county seat. The number of people that were in the city itself was about 7,200. But bless you. But during the day, because it's a county seat, the city would expand to about 20,000. Wendy's wanted to be able to come into Columbia and put a store there, but could not find any franchisee who was willing to make the investment. And so what Wendy's did was they created a company store. A company store is a franchise store that is owned by the franchisor. In other words, it is the closest to a vertical market that you can find in the whole franchising arrangement. It's run by the company itself. And the purpose of that is one of the 2 reasons, which is to invest in an area in which other franchisees do not wish. Other times you might put a store into a particular trade area as a way of monitoring what is going on in that particular trade area in relationship to the other franchisees. And so if you hear from the franchisees within Western Carolina saying that we have these difficulties that we're having to deal with and we're not sure what to do about them, it's not unusual for what the franchisors to politely create a store in that given area just to test and see if that is actually true. You might be in an area where you want to be there, where the repeat business is minimal, such that it could not generate enough profits for a franchisee. But you put that unit there, you allow it to grow. Once it's achieved a certain level, you can sell that store to a franchisee operation. Now, it isn't the most ideal because franchises grow faster when it has franchisees versus company outlets, but company outlets have their values. And so company stores exist, they have a purpose, and they are successful. What are some other reasons why you have a company store? Well, one of the reasons why is that you can create a career path for individuals within the franchise corporate and within the franchisees. What can happen is that you can use these as training areas, as two-way conduits for individuals in the corporation so that they have a backroom experience of what goes on in a franchise. So they complement each other. They make the chain stronger. Both the franchisor and the franchisees benefit. And you can also use these company stores to test new items on the menus. Certainly, this is one of also the things that Starbucks has, is that they prefer company outlets because they can more closely appropriate the profits and direct the operations as well. And so the company stores have all of the reasoning of a franchisee, except there's much closer connection naturally because they own them. And so all of these wonderful things that I've been talking about franchising, between them, what is the ultimate trends that are in franchising, and we look at the future? But one of the things, unfortunately, is that it hasn't entirely cracked the difficulty of failure rates. Failure rates in franchising are not as high as new locations, but they are higher than success. And so what that means is that just like when you open any other business, the odds are against you succeeding. The same thing is in franchising. They have much the same failure rates, or let's just say not as high a failure rates, but they fail nonetheless. And so what is the forecast for success for the franchising in general? The success for the franchise itself seems to be this magic Mendoza line of about 4 years. Franchises that last past that 4-year line, there's a sharply lower probability of failure. That's number one. The next is if they can attract a favorable rating from a third party, an influencer who comes along and complements that particular organization. Note my discussion about Duncan Hines. Colonel Sanders was working diligently. He was over 60. He used his first Social Security check to buy those things. But the poor man was working himself to death until Duncan Hines came along, complimented him on his work, and then franchising came along, and the rest is history. Third-party certification helps the franchisor gain an image as a legitimate player. But this third party has to be a true third party. It cannot be a shill. Because simply a shill is repeating what they're being told to say. And so, future franchises, the franchise itself, a high failure rate, but a little bit better than others. Success comes at the 4-year line, and whether or not you can attract a favorable rating from a third party. The building of a relationship, like in any channel structure, is important. And that is fortunately one of the positives in a franchise. You still have goal conflict, however. Everything is not pretty. Because once again, the manufacturers want to sell as many as possible, and the retailers want to make as much money as they can. Well, the same thing happens in the franchising relationship as well, and that's why you have the goal incongruity. Franchisor wants to be able to sell as much as they can. The franchisee wants to have profits, but the difficulty also is that the franchisor can saturate the market area by authorizing as many outlets as possible. Note Subway. There must be at least 7 Subways in this town now, if they haven't gone out completely. Whether from McDonald's, I don't even know if Walmart still has one. I don't think they do, but it's just a lot, okay? And so here's once again that difficulty, because the franchisor wants as many outlets as possible. Franchisee wants to control the market area. What's the solution? The solution is the franchisor offers existing franchisees the right of first refusal to add a new location. And this is where success happens at the franchisee level. So, where is he? There he is. So, this guy right there, his name is Bobby Youth. And Bobby was in my brother's class at St. John High School in Gulfport. He makes me call him Robert now. He was one of the messiest people I ever knew. He never washed his practice uniform for football. I swear by the end of the year, you could stand his pants up against the wall. I mean, he was just a dirty guy. Probably wouldn't like me saying. Anyway, he went to college at USM like I did. He graduated a year before I did. And he came to North Carolina to join the quote management team at Domino's when they were just coming out. So he was a pizza flipper. He started out doing deliveries. He worked for 2 years under Domino's. And after about 3 to 5 years, they offered him a franchise and he accepted it. They helped him a little bit on the, especially on the site selection, but he basically lived in the closet for the first 3 or 4 years while he was trying to build it up. Everything was going pretty good And then he got the contract for Camp Lejeune. Camp Lejeune is the #1 seller of pizzas in North Carolina, to give you an idea. It's the military base, okay? So fast forward to now, and this is Robert, as he makes me call him. This is Bobby in front of one of the Domino's that he was opening at the time. My brother saw Bobby at the 50-year reunion 2 years ago. Bobby still has 56 stores, Domino's, and the capital assets he has is worth $168 million. He's also got 17 smoothie franchises. Bobby did all of this coming out of college like y'all as an undergrad. He worked hard, went up all the way to the top. But in this little story, this is one of those essay questions you're going to ask is, what is the ultimate success for a franchisee? How does a franchisee achieve success? So that's Bobby, all you people up there, I apologize. This is my friend. He's the one who owns the Domino's here in North Carolina and won't return my phone calls. So what is the ultimate success? It's multi-unit franchises. The greatest chance for achieving success as a franchisee is multi-unit franchising. This is when a franchisee owns more than one outlet. What are the advantages to the franchisor with a multi-unit franchisor? It means that for Bobby's 57 Domino units that he owns, Domino's corporate does not have to have 57 contracts and 57 points of connection between the owners of those franchisees that got one, and it's Bobby. That is an enormous advantage for the franchisor. So it reduces the job of having to manage all of those relationships. It becomes a more manageable kind of thing for corporate. The advantage of #2 to Bobby as a franchisee is you preserve the knowledge of success of opening one franchise into opening another one. So look at the advantages that Bobby has by having 57 of them. It means that he can get this gigantic order of food from Domino's, and if one of the other Domino's he owns is short, those goods can be shifted to that Domino's to be able to cover losses or be able to cover shortages. It means that if I have a successful management structure in one of my franchisees and I open another, I can transfer that wealth of knowledge and experience from that successful franchise over to the new one and help it grow until the point where it's successful, and then we can go back. It means that if I have an up-and-coming manager, someone who's really good, and I don't want to lose them to Domino's corporate, I have an outlet for that person to be able to go to another franchise and achieve those goals and still stay within my corporation. And it also means the boss can take a break. You know, I've got 57 units out there. It means that if someone goes for an extended vacation or someone, God forbid, passes away, it means that the corporations can survive until a replacement comes along. So this single franchisee manages multiple locations, creates synergistic effects within the franchises that they own, and it spreads the wealth of knowledge across the companies that they own, or excuse me, the outlets that they own. And so just remember that one thing. What is the key to success in the franchisee, which is multi-unit franchising? Key to the success of the franchisor is to get past that 4-year block, or to have or to have recognition by a third party of your particular success. And so those are how we go about achieving success in franchising. Franchising, I think there's like 120,000 different types of franchising within the United States, some incredibly ridiculous number. Even though not all success is achievable and not all success is guaranteed, it's one of the best ways that you can try to hopefully achieve. Okay, and that finishes chapter 8. And now we go to chapter 9. So there'll be a few things I'm going to cherry pick out of chapter 9. We're going to talk about what are the 3 main characteristics of the future. We will talk about, let's see, the multi-channel and the omni-channel. And what they have brought to the future. And talk a little bit about one of the more successful ways in which the omni-channel has been implemented. Okay. What are the trends affecting the future in marketing channels? There are 3 major changes in channels that has substantially affected the future as we know it. And it is these 3. One is the shift to service-based economies, such as we talked about with Moody Price, where service becomes a key. The next is that markets have been rapidly globalized. And third, to the lesser extent, is e-commerce. Now, I'll talk about how services have changed, a little bit about globalization, and then when we talk about e-commerce, we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the omni-channel and a multi-channel. So, the first of the influences. How do we improve competitiveness and performance when we're selling all of the same things? So Emerson, like AT&T, need to find a way to get consumers, or their consumers, by the way, are people who own reefers, large refrigeration equipment. The difficulty with selling large refrigeration equipment is the same with selling mid-range and mainframe computer systems. The difficulty is that the selling cycle tends to be very, very spasmodic, for the lack of a better word. It tends to be fluctuating up and down. What Emerson did was the same thing that AT&T did. What they did, Emerson, was they basically bought back all of the equipment that they had originally sold to their customer base. They changed everything to a lease and to service agreements, which included calibration and maintenance of the equipment. It meant that the people who own the equipment instead of resisting the urge to be able to fix their equipment because it costs too much, it means that that money was already spent, and it encouraged the general use of maintenance. Maintenance on the machines extends the life of that equipment, so it actually means you generate more money from a lease and the maintenance contract than you do from actually selling the goods. It also means is that when you have customers on a lease, instead of this kind of up and down fluctuation with sales, you have this consistent flow of money over the year. So one of the cool things, anybody in here, the family own a Lexus? So one of the things Lexus does even now, when they first came out, was Lexus for free did oil changes for up to 36,000 miles of the first 3 years. Now they do it for the first year and the first 12,000 miles. How much does an oil change cost? It just costs the oil and the filters. How much would you think? Yeah, maybe at the most. Okay. Here's the cool thing. When Lexus first came out and they were giving these things away, what happened? People just like this came in and made sure that their vehicles were serviced, always. It meant also that the first 36,000 miles, which is the critical one, where you got to change the oil to get all of the parts that have been wearing inside for the very first time, get all those shavings out of the engine block. That was an important thing always with the first 5,000 miles of any engine. The next thing that they did is the Lexuses, as soon as they rolled in, while they were doing their oil changes, they hooked into the junctions, took all the information about the first 5,000 miles and sent it up to Lexus corporate and built this massive database about how well the Lexuses were doing in their first 36,000 miles. It created enormous advantages because the analytics could basically anticipate when the next failure could happen. It also meant that a service tech could say, sir, you've got like 90% of your brakes going, everything looks great. You might want to check in 40,000 miles and see how you're doing. It gave a much greater interaction to the service, and that's what made it successful. And so the shift to services means that you have more value than just merely selling the equipment. So we talked about disintermediation in the first chapter. We want to make sure to remind yourself is that disintermediation is when channel partners are taken out of the loop and manufacturers sell directly to the end users. This happens with e-commerce a lot, but you want to find reasons why you don't have disintermediation. You don't want to sell your Lexus's corporate sells directly to the end user. GM actually tried this in the 50s. GM was going to try to get rid of their franchise dealers and sell directly to consumers. When we talk about conflict, we'll tell you what happened with that. Basically, it bummed out. So disintermediation cuts channels out and doesn't always do a service to the consumers as well. So what are the characteristics of services? What do we need to know about services and consider them, what makes them unique, especially in the channel strategy? What we hope to do is transition our particular channel system into a service system in which there is more service that is created than just merely the products themselves. It is important to recognize that modern fast food places like McDonald's and certainly Chick-fil-A have kept up with the technology, and the things and the benefits that Chick-fil-A delivers now are so powerful that even if you're not necessarily fond of a chicken sandwich, just the draw that they bring from services more than compensates that. And so what is a service? A service, one of its characteristics is it's intangible. A service can't be inventoried, it can't be patented, although a process can. And you can't physically display it. I can't put a service, stack it on the shelf and keep it for later. Services, because of its intangibility, also make it more difficult to sell. This is where strong relationships, brand recognition help manage the higher risk that consumers perceive. And so that first thing is that they are intangible. Physical products are manufactured in an environment where many of the attributes are very precisely controlled. So supply chain people know that word Six Sigma. And what does Six Sigma mean? So if we were doing marketing research and we were looking at a standard bell curve, standard deviation from the middle is called a sigma. That's what the character is, okay? 2 standard deviations is a sigma. 3 standard deviations is a sigma. And what this means is out here is the probability of failure. 6 sigma means is that out of 1 million units that I make, 6 of them are going to fail. And that's what 6 sigma means. It means that through a continuous process of improvement, of the constant measuring of the system as it's working, as it's being used, in a highly controlled environment, every single piece is the same. Services, however, are not. It is hard to standardize performance. It makes it better to sell directly to end users because you can control the delivery and hopefully provide the more viable product. Heterogeneity means basically that everything is different. Who has one individual who you go do your hair and nobody else? Yeah, we all do. So I'm an actor, so I work with the Blue Ridge Community Theater. I'm going to be doing Horn of the West. They said I look too old. So I'm going in 2 weeks and getting my hair colored, hopefully. But anyway, I'm going to the guy who cuts my hair because I don't trust anyone else, quite simply. That's the performance heterogeneity can be a good thing, especially when you trust that person above all others. It means also that the producer and the end user are both producing whatever you're trying to achieve. Products are manufactured, shipped, and it is the sameness that makes that product acceptable. In services, you help create the product yourself. No, I like my hair a little shorter there. No, it doesn't quite look good. It is the connections between both that creates something special. This is what's known in marketing as co-creation. There's a substantial amount of research that has been done on this since 2004, but it absolutely works. It's like I did a journal article with Dr. Almanson, and we wrote on co-production when it comes to fitness. And so if I were to go to a trainer and I were to say, make me fit, what would that mean? I mean, in 100 years, fitness has meant corpulent, which is meaning overweight. It has meant slim. It has meant muscular. It has meant athletic. What does being fit mean? In a service industry, what happens is the provider interprets your particular wishes and transforms your wishes into actions that actually create that. And so this is what co-production is. And so because it is highly genetic, how do we go about how do we go about getting service capabilities? We cannot manufacture them. How do we find a way to do it? The number one fastest, easiest out of this list is acquisition. Apple, when they wanted to achieve some superior headphones, did not create their own. They bought Beats. Acquisition is the first easiest way to do it. It is also the way that if you're in an international way, that you can cross barriers and be able to start producing right away in another country. You just acquire the facilities. The second way you do it is to collaborate with another company. You reduce the risk because you spread the risk. And the last way, and this is the way that Apple used to do it historically, is through in-house development. Apple, during the Steve Jobs era, 10% of all profits went into research and development. It was slow and it was expensive, but you have a greater control on the products that you're trying to create. And you do have something of a higher achievement of success. The difficulty is it's expensive, it's lower. The next is globalization. So, what drives globalization? This is the only slide you'll have to worry about. Globalization is driven by three things. In traditional first world or developed countries, you have the difficulty of an aging population, decreasing birth rates. The United States birth rate is 1.6, which means that we are not, in essence, replacing ourselves. And then increasing competitive rivalries within the developed countries as well. It is a natural thing to grow your revenue into locations where competitors don't exist. Aldi, even though Aldi certainly had other supermarkets to deal with here, Aldi's, how do I put it? The way that they built their market was unique to the United States, and that's why it's achieved such success. So you actually find emerging markets expanding into developed markets. It's just quite simply you're trying to find a way to grow. Because of those emerging markets are just now, especially if you think of Eastern Europe, are just now expanding into capitalism, you find that there are emerging markets that make expansion viable. And naturally what happens is the ability to connect through the internet makes that much faster as well. And the other thing of that is to find individuals that are within your particular market segment. You can find those individuals overseas just as easily as you can within the United States. Expansion by internet coverage also means is that the focus on globalization is greater than it has been at any time. And so that's all there is about globalization. The last is e-commerce. And e-commerce, its biggest growth has happened in two areas, and that is the multi-channel and the omni-channel, and I'm explaining those right now. So don't worry about all these others. We're going to talk about the multi-channel and the omni-channel now. So the multi-channel is when a place like Walmart, instead of just simply selling the goods out of their traditional outlet, you can come into Walmart, order in a catalog way, and have those goods shipped to your home. Multi-channels are when there are more than one outlet for consumers to purchase from a single company. Now, the inherent issue with multi-channel is basically this. Multi-channel outlets tend to be siloed. In other words, they are ways for a store, once it's been given an individual order, what it's going to do is it's going to find any way that they can ship them to you as possible. But it doesn't mean that there's an interconnection, and it doesn't mean the consumer drives it. So you drive new channels, as we remember in chapter 2, to pick up different unique market segments that don't have a traditional way of connecting with us. And so that's why the multi-channel exists. Multi-channel started to see writings on it in 2007, but it was the multi-channel that spread to the omni-channel where we really saw success. So just a little history, by the way, just to let you know. So Walmart was very concerned about Amazon ultimately taking over most of their business. Now, the truth is, Walmart sells probably twice as much as Amazon does a year. And one of those, quite simply, is the great advantages of having their stores like it is. In my MBA, when I wrote my thesis, one of the things that I talked about that Walmart should consider themselves as global warehouses and not necessarily retail outlets. Walmart all of a sudden realized that they were going to lose, and they were going to lose big. In 2014, Walmart bought Jet.com. Now, you don't know the name now because it's gone away, but Jet.com had this super dynamic search engine that was built around snaking through the internet and finding the best price for a given item within a frame of days that you gave it. And so give me the best price of a Nintendo Switch and give it to me within a week. And so what would happen is the Jet engine would go through, snake through the systems, find the best price, send the deals to you, and then ultimately you would succeed. Walmart bought Jet.com, took the CEO of Jet.com and made him their chief information officer. Immediately after that, he started redesigning the Walmart website, and then you saw Walmart go on this acquisition. They bought Voodoo.com. They sold that in 2021. They bought Moosejaw.com, which is actually a outdoor recreation system. They bought Flipkart, which is actually the Indian version of Amazon. And then they bought ShoeBuy and Shoes.com. And Shoes.com now sells about 30 million shoes a year, pair of shoes a year through them. So all of these are Walmart acquisitions. You never saw that they actually were, but all of this was to spread different ways for Walmart to be able to sell their goods through different channels. These were all siloed. None of them connected with each other. This is the example of the multi-channel. So 2009, I am teaching a sales management course, and I was making some point about telephones. And I asked everybody in 2009, who has a smartphone? And everyone had a smartphone. I had a Razor, and I was like, something's happened and it's just going right over my head. You started to see around 2008, 2009, this discussion of what's called the omni-channel. Okay. We're moving from a multi-channel environment to an omni-channel environment. And the difference is that the consumer initiated all interactions. Walmart did not pick up its phone and said, take the shipment that way. The consumer starts the initial process, determines how they're going to pay for it, and ultimately which are the channels to use. The omni-channel looked at the concept of the endless aisle, which is what you see in Amazon, where when you look for one thing, not only you see it within the Amazon channels, you see it within all of the associated businesses that work with Amazon as well. And so this seminal article in 2013 had this quote: in the past, brick and mortar retail outlets were unique in allowing consumers to touch and feel merchandise, which they still do, and provide instant gratification. Internet retailers, meanwhile, tried to woo shoppers with wide product selection. This is what Amazon does: low prices and content such as product reviews and ratings. As the retail industry evolves into the omni-channel retailing, the distinctions between physical and online will vanish, turning the room into a showroom without walls. And so what it means is, from this little device, I can control all of my interactions with every corporation, and I can search, buy, and receive all from here, and it's driven solely by the consumer. And basically, people in channels are trying to keep up, and have to some extent, but not completely all the way. So, what is the differences? This is what the differences between the omni-channel and the multi-channel is in a drawing. What it means basically is that when you look at the omni-channel, the consumer controls everything. It means that when channel is trying to do research on how many people come online and where they come to look at their goods, all they know is what happens on their own website. Omni-channels have a great source of what is known as channel pollution, because you never know what a consumer uses to go out and do their search, what they use when they're making their consideration set, ultimately when they're doing their purchase evaluations, and then post-purchase ones. It's a mess. But we know this is the future. What is the key? This is a test question. The multi-channel is consumer-centric or customer-centric. And the omni-channel is customer-driven. The consumer has bypassed the retailers. They have bypassed the wholesalers. They've even bypassed the manufacturers. The consumers have all control. And the consideration is that multi-channel retailing is moving to omni-channel retailing, and that's the brave world as it is. And so the three emerging trends that are in channels are the greater need for services, the growth in globalization, and the dramatic swing and shift to e-commerce, which does include the multi-channel and the omni. Okay, and that is chapter 9. So I will load these up. I'll have them all up tonight. As I said before, you can have the weekend to do the test. Just remember that as soon as you start it, you have 75 minutes to complete it. Any questions? All right, folks, go have a good weekend. Enjoy this beautiful spring weather. Bring an umbrella.